This is Fancy Nancy, and I'm JaneOConnor. I wrote all the Fancy Nancy books, and today I'm going to read you the very first one that I wrote, which was just called Fancy Nancy, and I wrote it before I'm sure any of you were born. So here we go. This is my room before I made it fancy. And do you see how all her furniture is very plain and white? I love being fancy. And do you see that Nancy has decorated every inch of her room? My favorite color is fuchsia. That's a fancy way of saying purple. I like to write my name with a pen that has a plume. That's a fancy way of saying feather. And I can't wait to learn French because everything in French sounds fancy. Nobody in my family is fancy at all. They never even asked for sprinkles. And look, they're eating vanilla ice cream cones, except for Nancy, who has just a lovely banana split. Then I get an idea that's stupendous. That's a fancy word for great. And look, Nancy's in the supermarket and she sees all the ads on a board. Maybe I can teach my family how to be fancy. I make an ad and stick it on the fridge. Do you see it here? It says, learn to be fancy with lessons from Nancy. Start today. Easy, fun, free. Sounds great, doesn't it? Soon there is a knock on my door. My family saw the ad. They want to get started right away. And look, Nancy has put out displays to show her parents the difference between a fancy hat and a plain baseball hat, between a fancy shoe and a plain shoe, and between fancy dolls and plain dolls. The trouble is, my family doesn't own any fancy clothes. That's okay. I go find, what's that fancy word? Oh, yes, accessories. And look how many accessories Nancy has brought in. Ooh la la. My family is posh. That's a fancy word for fancy. And do you see her mother has a tutu on for a hat? My mom twirls in front of the mirror. Why don't we go somewhere fancy tonight? She says. How about dinner at the King's Crown? Dad suggests. Wow! My parents are acting fancier already. May I escort you lovely ladies outside? The limousine is waiting, her father tells them. My dad is our chauffeur. That's a fancy word for driver. And they don't really have a limousine. They just have a plain gray car. This is my favorite picture coming up. When we arrive at the King's Crown, everyone looks up. They probably think we're movie stars. I am so proud of my whole family. They eat with their pinkies up and call each other darling. And the next time you have a cookie, I want you to eat with your pinky up and say, this is delicious, darling. For dessert, let's have parfaits, my mom says. That's French for ice cream sundaes. Amazing! My mother knows French. When our parfaits are ready, I curtsy and say, merci, and that's French for thank you. Oh my, I don't think Nancy notices something. That might be a problem. I'm a little frightened to turn the page. I carry the tray like a fancy French waiter. Oops! I trip. I slip. The tray does a double flip. And you know what goes up has to come down. I don't feel fancy anymore. I want to go home. And look, her little sister is trying to cheer her up by giving her back her crown. Can you see her there? After I get all cleaned up, I put on my dressing gown. Those are fancy words for bathrobe. I feel much better. I'm ready for a parfait. And look, her parents have gotten ice cream plus chocolate syrup plus sprinkles plus whipped cream. I tell my parents, thank you for being fancy tonight. And here she is all cozy in bed. I love you, my dad says. I love you, my mom says. And all I say back is, I love you, because there isn't a fancy or better way of saying that. And now, before we go, I'm just going to teach you one fancy thing you can do at home. And if you want, maybe you'll teach it to some grown-ups. Do you think that would be a good idea, Nancy? Yes, she does. So part of being fancy is you must have good posture, which means standing up straight. And when I was a little girl, we used to learn by putting a book on our head and balancing it. But a book could fall and maybe hurt somebody, or the book might get hurt. We love books, right? So a much better way is to balance a banana on your head, because it makes you keep your head very straight and you look tall and graceful. And I'm going to turn around, and now I am going to bid you adieu.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to Gotham Reads for more of your favorite children's books read aloud daily.